I remember the exact moment it happened. My boss, Randall Smith, stood at the head of the conference table, all polished confidence. I was off to the side, flipping through papers for our big client presentation. Suddenly, he paused and looked at me with a smirk that made my stomach twist. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he laughed and said, "Oh, don't mind her. She's just here to fill seats. I run the real show." The room froze. My cheeks burned, but I kept silent. The client, a tall man in a crisp suit, glanced at me sympathetically. He seemed confused, maybe even uncomfortable. My heart pounded so loud I thought everyone could hear it. No one else spoke. In that moment, time slowed. I sensed an ache in my chest, part hurt and part outrage. I had poured years of my life into this company. I had done late nights, worked weekends, and often saved deals that Randall nearly botched. Yet here he was, belittling me in front of someone crucial to our company's future. I swallowed hard, told myself not to cry, and decided on the spot. I would never let this humiliation stand. I started at New Dawn Innovations 15 years ago, back when we were still operating out of a small, single-floor office. I was the fifth person hired. My background in project management and finance made me a flexible resource. They called me the Swiss Army knife, because I juggled every imaginable task. At first, Randall was just a senior manager, and our founder, Mr. Donahue, was an older gentleman with a passion for cutting-edge software. He believed in letting talented people do their thing. His leadership style involved trust and generosity, so I felt supported. We were a tight-knit family back then. As we grew, I discovered ways to optimize operations and cut unnecessary costs. I negotiated better contracts with suppliers and found new clients through my personal network. Each time the company succeeded, Randall's star rose. He had a knack for taking credit, sometimes slyly, sometimes outright. But back then, I dismissed it. We were a team, right? Over the years, employees came and went, but I stayed. It felt like my second home. Even Randall, despite his ego, was someone I tolerated. I believed that loyalty and hard work would see me through any challenges. I had no idea how that loyalty would be repaid. Looking back, there were warning signs that Randall's ambition might overshadow everything else. Whenever he introduced me to clients, he'd focus on my administrative role. He never highlighted the strategic or financial solutions I contributed. If a client asked me a direct question, Randall would interrupt and take over. I shrugged it off. After all, I wasn't there for the spotlight. I loved solving problems and keeping projects on track. But over time, I noticed how his eyes would narrow whenever someone praised me. He'd interrupt with, "Yes, we all did great," and shift the attention to himself. Tension grew between us in unspoken ways. My spreadsheets and project charts made the company more efficient, but Randall always gave me half-hearted compliments. He'd say, "Good job, I guess," or "That's neat," instead of an honest, "Well done." It stung, but I tried to dismiss it as his personality flaw. None of it prepared me for the brutal public insult that finally broke my patience. Still, there was one thing I never revealed: a discreet financial arrangement I had made with Mr. Donahue before his retirement. At the time, I thought it was just a safety net. I never imagined it would become the key to a monumental shift in power. We had been courting Maxwell & Co. for months. They were a huge conglomerate known for their expansive reach in technology services. One lucrative deal with them could double our quarterly profits. Randall was determined to land them. One morning, Randall strutted into my office, wearing that self-assured grin. "We've got the Maxwell people coming in at 10, he said. "Make sure you have the numbers ready. And for heaven's sake, try not to complicate things." I forced a polite smile. I had already prepared a detailed financial breakdown, project timeline, and synergy report. That morning felt different. Randall was too smug, as if he had something grand planned. I brushed off the uneasy feeling and went to set up the conference room. By 10, the Maxwell team arrived. They were an imposing group: sharp suits, firm handshakes, guarded expressions. Randall greeted them lavishly, cracking jokes, leading them inside. I found a corner seat, ready to present my slides. But Randall barely glanced at me. As the meeting began, I could feel a strange energy in the air. Randall was revving up his charm, and he was prepared to do anything to impress these people, even if it meant using me as a convenient punchline. That's when it happened. the moment Randall publicly insulted me, dismissing my role in front of the Maxwell team. The scene played out like a slow-motion nightmare. He was in the middle of explaining how our leadership made all executive decisions, and someone asked if I was also on the leadership team. His reply was swift and crushing. "She just handles day-to-day grunt work. The real thinking happens up here," he said, tapping his temple with a smug grin. The Maxwell representatives looked taken aback. One even cleared his throat, like he wasn't sure if Randall was joking or being serious. But the room's silence confirmed it was real. My face went hot. A tremor spread through my hands, but I swallowed the anger. My heart pounded in my ears. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but nothing came out. The tension was suffocating. And the worst part? Randall didn't even bother to look in my direction after his remark. He just kept going, as if his words had been an innocent aside. I tried to refocus on the presentation. My mind raced. Did I step out right then, or did I stay professional? Ultimately, I stayed. But inside, something broke, and I knew there would be consequences. After the meeting, I felt like a deflated balloon. The Maxwell team offered polite goodbyes, looking slightly uncomfortable. They shook my hand with a sympathetic nod. Perhaps they sensed I was more than just an assistant. Randall breezed past me, all smiles and self-congratulation, as if nothing had happened. I wanted to cry, scream, or slam the door. Instead, I locked myself in a small side office, leaning against the wall until I steadied my breathing. I replayed his insulting words on a loop, the memory clawing at my self-esteem. My phone buzzed, text messages from close colleagues who had witnessed the humiliation. "Are you okay?" "That was awful." One coworker knocked on the door, asking if they could do anything. I answered with a shaky voice, "I'm fine, just need a minute." On the inside, though, I was a storm of emotions. Betrayal, anger, and a fierce determination not to remain a victim. I remembered the quiet arrangement I'd made with our former founder. For years I had never used it as leverage, but something in me was waking up. Maybe it was time to remind Randall and the entire board just how valuable I really was. It took me days to process that embarrassment. Each time I passed Randall in the hall, I'd feel a hollow ache in my chest. He didn't apologize or acknowledge his harsh words. In fact, he acted like it never happened. That made it all worse. But it also fueled a new resolve. I began piecing together every instance where Randall took credit for my work, every penny he wasted in the budget, every meeting he arrived at unprepared. I cataloged them in a personal notebook, complete with dates and brief descriptions. It felt like building a case file, but I still wasn't certain what I'd do with it. Alongside this, I reviewed the legal documents Mr. Donahue had signed years ago. He had sold me a significant portion of his shares at a low rate to reward my loyalty and hard work, on the condition I keep it confidential. The paperwork was buried deep in my home office file cabinet. Now, I read it carefully, feeling a surge of adrenaline. It dawned on me. I wasn't just an employee. I was a major shareholder. And it was time to exercise that power, especially against a boss who dared to humiliate me in front of our biggest potential client. I remember the day Mr. Donahue offered me his shares. It was a quiet afternoon, just after a successful product launch. He said he was planning to retire soon and wanted to ensure that the company remained in good hands. "You've been the real backbone around here," he had said with a kind smile. His terms were simple. I'd pay a small lump sum, and he'd transfer 40% of his stake to me. No public announcement would be made. Mr. Donahue believed I should keep it under wraps until the time was right. At the moment, I wondered why he insisted on secrecy, but I trusted his judgment. After the shares officially transferred, I filed away the documents, never telling anyone. Over the years, I almost forgot about it, except for the annual shareholder reports that arrived in my mailbox. But now, the memory was crystal clear. I realized how crucial that deal had become. In essence, I own nearly half of the company's original founder shares, making me a silent powerhouse. Randall was oblivious to this. He saw me as nothing more than an operational manager, a convenient scapegoat for his own failings. That ignorance would soon be his downfall. With my secret in mind, I started observing Randall more closely. I attended staff meetings where he bragged about securing the Maxwell deal, acting like it was a done deal, even though Maxwell & Co. had yet to sign any official contract. I noticed how he dismissed other team members' opinions. I also noticed how some employees nodded obediently, while others winced at his arrogance. I decided to quietly approach a few key figures in the company, people who had always respected my work. Over coffee or brief hallway chats, I'd ask their thoughts on the direction of the firm. Their frustration spilled out. They felt overshadowed by Randall's big talk, but recognized that behind the scenes, real work was handled by folks like me. I kept my own opinions guarded, but hinted that changes might be on the horizon. A few managers, especially those who had been around since the early days, showed glimmers of excitement. Perhaps they sensed a shift in power was coming, or maybe they were just glad someone was finally questioning Randall. These small conversations reaffirmed my belief. I wasn't alone. There were others who felt sidelined, and I was preparing for something bigger than a simple confrontation. Randall's behavior escalated. He started walking around the office as though he was already a victorious CEO of a multi-million-dollar enterprise, bragging about future expansions and international offices. "We'll have to hire more staff, global divisions, maybe open a new branch in Europe," he said loudly at an all-hands meeting. People clapped politely, but I saw their eyes. They looked confused, maybe even skeptical. Our revenue hadn't jumped yet. The Maxwell deal wasn't finalized. We were operating on speculation, but Randall beamed, convinced he'd landed the biggest catch of his career. Behind the scenes, morale dipped. Smaller issues in the product line were being ignored in favor of flashy presentations to impress Maxwell & Co. Deadlines started slipping. If anyone dared mention problems, Randall brushed them aside or blamed them for negativity. Meanwhile, I quietly kept track of everything: product flaws, missed deadlines, inflated promises, and random spending for appearances, like the newly renovated lobby that nobody asked for. My frustration bubbled, but I maintained my calm facade. Underneath, though, I felt a mixture of anger and determination. If Randall refused to listen to reason, then he would face the consequences of his pride. My role in the company became more and more sidelined. Randall stopped inviting me to client meetings. When marketing wanted project updates, he told them to speak to him directly. It was clear he wanted to diminish my presence until I was practically invisible. But ironically, his plan backfired. With fewer meetings to attend, I had more time to gather crucial data and refine my strategy. I deepened my relationships with the staff who actually kept the company running: engineers, customer service reps, and finance analysts. They trusted me because I treated them as equals, respecting their expertise and insights. I could sense Randall's impatience growing. He wanted immediate results from Maxwell & Co., but the client was asking tough questions about our infrastructure and long-term plans. I overheard him on the phone, struggling to address their concerns. He'd boast about our elite project team, even though he'd effectively cut that team out of meaningful discussions. Behind closed doors, I prepared a separate binder of information for Maxwell & Co., detailing realistic projections and the actual capabilities of our product lines. I knew that once the time was right, I'd make sure they received the truth, and that would change everything. Maxwell & Co. scheduled a second visit to finalize some terms. The tension in the office was palpable. Randall was frantic, barking orders, rearranging conference rooms, and insisting on an elaborate catered lunch. "We have to look impeccable," he kept saying. I stayed on the sidelines, acting like a quiet observer. He didn't invite me to the main negotiation, but I made sure to arrange a private meeting with one of Maxwell's top managers, Miss Caldwell, a calm, perceptive woman. She remembered me from the first fiasco and seemed genuinely concerned about how I was treated. When Miss Caldwell arrived, I politely asked if she'd spare a few minutes. She agreed. We stepped into a small break room, and I handed her a concise folder. "This is the real status of our operations," I said gently. Her eyebrows rose as she scanned the pages. It listed both our strengths and weaknesses, along with realistic timelines for deliverables. I explained how some claims Randall had made were exaggerated or entirely unfounded. She listened, eyes focused, occasionally nodding. When I finished, she looked at me with new respect. "Thank you for your honesty," she said softly. I only smiled. I knew her reaction would ripple through her organization and possibly through ours. Randall had no idea I met with Miss Caldwell. he was too busy orchestrating a grand show in the main conference room. The catered lunch arrived. Fancy pastries, exotic fruit platters, miniature sandwiches. He strutted around, making sure everything looked expensive and impressive. Meanwhile, Miss Caldwell rejoined her team. They spoke among themselves with guarded expressions. I noticed some glances in my direction, a silent acknowledgement that they knew more than Randall realized. Throughout that day, Randall delivered a series of over-the-top promises. He painted a rosy picture of unstoppable growth, frictionless scaling, and guaranteed high profits. His voice boomed with confidence. The Maxwell team nodded politely but asked pointed questions. I could see sweat forming at his temples when he struggled to answer specifics. I quietly observed from the doorway, arms folded. Nobody paid much attention to me, and that suited me perfectly. I took notes, documenting every time Randall stumbled or dodged a technical question. Part of me felt a surge of vindication. He was digging his own hole, deeper and deeper. By late afternoon, Maxwell's representatives left. Randall, thinking he had dazzled them, walked away beaming. I knew better. This showdown was far from over. A few days later, subtle cracks began to appear. Randall received an email from Maxwell & Co. requesting additional proof of our claims. They wanted to see operational data and real customer feedback. They also had concerns about resource allocation and project timelines. This blindsided Randall. He didn't have anything tangible to back his grand promises. Agitated, he stormed into the office, slamming doors and scolding people for not being prepared. The staff looked at each other, puzzled. Nobody had been asked to gather that data before. Soon, frantic memos flooded our inboxes, demanding immediate reports and surveys. I quietly supplied some basic statistics, leaving out deeper insights I had collected. Randall skimmed them, scowling. "This is too vague," he shouted, pacing in his office. I shrugged calmly. "That's the data we have on short notice," I said. He growled but didn't blame me directly. He knew on some level that I controlled the numbers. With every passing day, Randall's veneer of confidence chipped away. He spent hours calling vendors, clients, and even ex-employees, trying to patch together impressive figures. But the truth remained. We had serious operational gaps, and our finances weren't as rosy as he portrayed. The stress was getting to him, and I felt no sympathy. Behind the scenes, I consolidated my alliances. Some long-standing employees, like Jenna in HR and Luis in engineering, privately confided that Randall's leadership was draining morale. They wanted real solutions, not flashy talk. I shared bits of information, news about Maxwell's hesitation, a few documented oversights by Randall, and the potential consequences if we continued this charade. I never outright told them about my shares, but they sensed I had a plan. Together, we discussed how the company should be run. More collaboration, transparency, and honest timelines. Meanwhile, I asked each ally to compile a report detailing inefficiencies or potential improvements. Jenna sent me a file on high turnover rates that Randall ignored. Luis outlined critical product bugs that needed immediate attention. I filed these under Company Health Check, a private folder on my computer. Through these discussions, I realized how many people shared my vision. They respected my calm, methodical approach and had long felt overshadowed by Randall's theatrics. It was only a matter of time before I unveiled my full plan. The sense of unity among the staff gave me courage. I was no longer standing alone. Randall announced a grand demonstration of our flagship product for Maxwell & Co. He promised it would showcase revolutionary features, unveiling them live. The event was scheduled for a Thursday morning in our large auditorium. Employees were ordered to attend and show enthusiasm. In the days leading up to it, we worked tirelessly, except Randall. He mostly strutted around, giving shallow pep talks, while actual developers and project managers scrambled to fix code and prepare slides. I noticed them working late, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. Yet Randall took no interest in details. By the time Thursday arrived, tension hung in the air like a thick fog. The Maxwell team arrived, wearing polite smiles. Randall, wearing his most expensive suit, launched into a theatrical introduction. Then he attempted to demo the software. It crashed mid-presentation. A hush fell over the room. Randall frantically tried to reboot the system, pressing keys, muttering curses under his breath. The Maxwell representatives exchanged uneasy glances. Randall's face reddened as he pretended it was just a minor glitch. But after multiple failures, the demonstration halted. Standing at the back, I watched the fiasco unfold. Deep inside, I felt a pang of pride in my own professionalism. I might have saved him, if only he had respected me enough to ask. After the disastrous demo, Randall exploded. He demanded to know who had prepared the code, who set up the presentation, and why no one anticipated the crash. People shied away as he stormed through the corridors, pointing fingers. A few employees tried to explain that the timeline was rushed, but Randall refused to listen. He cornered me near the break room, jabbing a finger in the air. "You should have seen this coming," he yelled, his voice echoing off the walls. "You're supposed to handle operations, right?" I stared at him, my jaw clenched. Yes, I managed operations, but not the impossible tasks he conjured overnight. "I handle tasks and deadlines when they're communicated," I replied in a controlled tone. "Nobody asked for a code review until 2 days ago." He scowled, looking around as if searching for someone else to accuse. "We're on thin ice with Maxwell, and you're not lifting a finger to help," he hissed. I said nothing, just gave him a measured look. The truth was, I could have fixed many issues had he valued my input, but now it was too late for easy fixes. Randall was reaping the chaos he'd sown. Word spread that Maxwell & Co. was losing faith in Randall's leadership. Tensions reached a boiling point. One afternoon, Randall asked for an emergency board meeting. Ironically, he didn't invite me, but as a major shareholder, I had every right to attend. When I walked into the boardroom, Randall did a double take. "This is a private board session," he snapped, trying to dismiss me. I calmly took a seat. "I have a say here," I replied. The other board members looked puzzled. Some recognized me as a loyal employee, but not one with board authority. Then, quietly, I produced copies of the share documents. I explained that I had acquired nearly half of Mr. Donahue's original stake. Gasps rippled around the table. Randall's face went pale, then red. He sputtered. "How is that possible? Why didn't anyone know?" I shrugged. It was a private arrangement. Mr. Donahue trusted me to protect this company when necessary. My voice remained firm, even though my heart pounded. The board members exchanged glances. Randall looked like he'd been punched in the gut. At that moment, the balance of power shifted. Every eye turned to me, waiting for what I'd say next. Randall tried to compose himself, but his voice wavered. "You've hidden this all this time? You had no right to." I cut him off gently. "I had every right. Mr. Donahue sold me his shares under legal terms. I haven't interfered until now because I believed in the company's mission. But what I've seen lately is troubling. The Maxwell deal is in jeopardy because of empty promises and mismanagement." A board member cleared his throat. "Is this true, Randall? Have you overstated our capabilities?" Randall hesitated, then tried to spin the story. "We're just aiming high. Any missteps are normal in a growth phase." But the tension in the room spoke louder than his excuses. I laid out the facts: missing project deadlines, inflated budgets, and the fiasco of the public demo. Each detail I had meticulously recorded. The board members read through the documents in silence. The evidence was undeniable. Randall glared at me, but behind his anger, I sensed fear. He realized he'd lost control of the narrative. At the end of the meeting, I made a simple statement. "We need a leadership change if we want to salvage the Maxwell deal, and this company." In the days that followed, the board deliberated. Some members favored Randall out of habit. He had been a visible face for years. But the weight of my shares, combined with the damning evidence of his failures, tilted the balance in my favor. Quietly, I reached out to Maxwell & Co. and arranged a direct meeting. This time, they welcomed me warmly. Miss Caldwell was there, her gaze steady. I apologized for the company's recent unprofessionalism and presented a more realistic plan for cooperation, outlining achievable milestones, resource needs, and honest timelines. They seemed appreciative of my candor. "We respect transparency," Miss Caldwell said with a slight smile. Before we ended, she hinted that they might consider staying in talks if Randall was no longer in charge of negotiations. It was a clear message: cut out the chaos, or they'd walk. Buoyed by this, I returned to the office. My allies cheered me on, silently or with small gestures of support. Even employees who barely knew me sensed that I stood for something more genuine. A shift in atmosphere swept through the halls. Hopeful whispers replaced anxious tension. We all waited to see how the board would finalize its decision about Randall. Late one evening, after most employees had gone home, Randall appeared in my doorway. He looked exhausted, his hair disheveled, eyes rimmed red. For a moment, I thought he might burst into tears. He cleared his throat. "We need to talk," he said in a quiet, shaky voice. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. He lowered himself into a chair, pressing his palms together as if in prayer. "Look, I know things got out of hand," he muttered. "I need your help to keep Maxwell on board. If we lose them, the board will push me out." I studied his face, remembering how he'd humiliated me to impress those same clients. Now he was pleading. "Why come to me?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He let out a heavy sigh. "Because you're the only one who knows this company inside and out. People trust you. You have the shares." He swallowed, avoiding my eyes. I shouldn't have said those things to you. I was trying to impress them, and I messed up." Part of me felt a twinge of compassion, but I also recalled the sting of his words and the stress he caused others. "I'll think about it," I said, and that was all I offered. The following week, the board convened an emergency session to decide the leadership fate of the company. Randall tried to salvage his position, painting himself as a visionary who just needed more support. I waited for him to finish, then calmly presented an alternative plan. "I propose a new leadership approach, one rooted in collaboration," I said, distributing updated packets. Inside were thorough solutions to address operational inefficiencies, a clear budget plan, and a realistic timeline for the Maxwell project. "Here's how we regain Maxwell's trust and move forward responsibly," I continued. "This plan has the support of key personnel who've contributed valuable insights." The board members scanned my proposal, nodding at its clarity and feasibility. Some asked pointed questions, and I answered with specifics. Then came the moment of decision. Voices rose. "This is compelling. We need stability right now. Randall's approach has led us astray." Randall, red-faced, accused me of orchestrating a coup, but his accusations felt hollow. The facts were on my side. In the end, the board took a vote of no confidence in Randall. They offered me the interim CEO position. My heart pounded, but I stayed composed as I accepted the responsibility, knowing this moment would change everything. When the vote was announced, Randall deflated like a punctured balloon. He stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes darting around as if looking for a lifeline. None came. No one leaped to his defense. The evidence was too strong, and trust was too broken. Board members exchanged cautious smiles, and a few employees in the corridor whispered congratulations to me. Randall lingered by the conference room door. "So that's it?" he asked, voice trembling. "After all I've done?" I swallowed, looking him in the eye. "You did a lot," I said, "both good and bad, but you lost sight of what truly matters. Respect, teamwork, honesty. People saw through the showmanship." He opened his mouth as if to argue, but then just lowered his head. With the board's final word, Randall was removed from his leadership role, effective immediately. He was granted a severance package in accordance with his contract, but his authority was gone. As I left the room, I felt an enormous weight lifting from my shoulders. This was a victory for everyone who believed in real work and genuine respect. Randall's era had ended, and a new chapter for New Dawn Innovations was just beginning. In the days that followed, I formally stepped into the role of interim CEO, supported by a cautious but hopeful board. I gathered the employees in the main auditorium, addressing them with a straightforward, honest speech. "We'll get back on track with real teamwork and transparency." The mood shifted instantly. Applause broke out, and I saw relief in people's eyes. My first directive was to repair the relationship with Maxwell & Co. I personally visited their office, working out a new timeline and clarifying deliverables. Miss Caldwell nodded as I spoke. "We appreciate integrity," she said. A few days later, they signed a revised partnership agreement. Word spread throughout the industry that New Dawn Innovations had replaced its flamboyant leader with someone more grounded. We even began attracting talent who valued a stable, respectful work culture. Little by little, the company found new momentum. I reflected on the painful journey. Randall's public insult had been humiliating, but in the grand scheme, it forced me to confront what I'd always known deep down. I was more than just an employee. My experience, loyalty, and carefully maintained connections had real value, and I finally learned to wield that value when it mattered most. Life at New Dawn Innovations changed drastically under my leadership. Meetings became more collaborative, and employees felt safe sharing problems before they turned into crises. We set realistic goals, tackled product bugs, and refocused on customer satisfaction. Maxwell & Co. became a loyal partner, our biggest client to date. I still recall the stunned look on Randall's face as he realized the power I held all along. Part of me wonders if he'll learn a deeper lesson about respecting those who contribute behind the scenes. Perhaps he'll move on, start something new. I bear him no ill will now. We've both grown in our own ways. As I walk through the halls, I sometimes catch my reflection in the polished glass windows. I see a woman who once allowed herself to be sidelined, unsure of her own authority. Now, I stride forward with confidence. Every handshake, every conversation feels charged with a sense of purpose. This isn't just a job anymore. It's a testament to perseverance, respect, and knowing one's worth. In the end, the ultimate victory wasn't about driving Randall out or flaunting my silent ownership. It was about transforming a toxic environment into a place where people are valued. And that, I believe, is the greatest success story of all.